So that seemed like a good song to think about early in this morning's theme, because this morning's theme we're talking about questions. We're beginning this whole series on disputable questions, a series of disputable questions. And by that, what I mean, of course, is that the questions we sometimes ask are questionable. Give you an example. Why did the chicken cross the road? That was a good, and by the way, I heard some amazing stories. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter. Anybody in here on Twitter at all? Anybody do Twitter? Yeah, I didn't know that I didn't think we were a Twitter crowd, but yeah, I've tried to get into that. I was going to say you could tweet your answers on there because we have a Twitter address. Is that what do you call it? A hashtag, thank you. We do, it's on there, so you could actually do that, but I'm not sure anybody would read it. So anyway, though, so I want to tell you this really quick, the story that actually I wrote, but I can't claim authorship of it completely because I actually heard it from a second grader some years ago when I was telling stories at a school. And she came up to me after hearing something, and she says, I'm working on a story. And I said, all right. So she told me basically this story. And she said, Abby was with her father outside, and they were looking at the sky, which was blue but beginning to fill with clouds. And Abby looked up at these clouds. Abby was only 3.5 years old, not 3. And she looked at her dad and she said, what are those? And her dad said, those are clouds. And then she said, no, it's an elephant. And it's a crocodile. And it's a bus. And so they laid down in the grass, and the two of them began to play this game. You've played the game before yourselves, I'm sure, perhaps as a child, perhaps with a child. And they watched the clouds parade across the sky when suddenly Abby sat up, and she looked at her dad, and she said, I want to touch them. And he said, well, you can't. They're too high. You can't reach them. She said, but I really want to touch them. They look like they're right there. And they filled the sky so brilliantly. They did look like they were just hanging just above their heads. But of course, she tried to reach and she couldn't. And her dad consoled her and said, it's all right, it's okay, they're just for looking at. And so they laid there and they watched for a little while longer when Father got up and he went inside the house. Meanwhile, Abby was determined. She got a stepladder from in the garage, took it out, and started stepping up the stepladder. She got about 4 feet high when her father saw through the window, came running out. She was trying to stretch. Balance was there just delicately. And he grabbed hold and said, what are you doing? She said, I'm trying to touch the clouds. He said, you can't do that. They're too high. So he got her down and he took the ladder back inside. She didn't give up. She crawled up on the hood of the car, then stood up on top of the car. Her mother saw her out the window and said, go get her. Abby's trying to get on top of the car. She's going to fall off. And she was reaching and jumping, and the car roof was denting in. And then he came and grabbed her. He said, what are you doing? She said, I'm trying to touch the cloud. He said, well, you can't do that. It's too high. And so he grabbed her, took her down. Well, she tried this in several different versions, trying to get up as high as she could, standing on a wall. She even tried to climb a tree, but got stuck at the low branch. They had to get her down until finally it got later in the afternoon, and the wind was picking up, and the clouds were actually getting kind of thick. And he says, you know what? We're just going to go inside now. We can watch the clouds rain. She said, I don't want to watch them. They're unhappy. I don't want to watch them. She got all sad. She said, it's like the clouds. They're crying. She went inside and she watched outside as the rain was falling and hitting the ground. A few moments later, her mom and dad came running into the living room where she'd been looking outside, but she wasn't in the living room. She was outside. And when they looked out the window, they saw her running and then laying down in the water and then slapping her hands in the puddles. And he ran out and they said, Abby, what are you doing? She said, I'm touching the clouds.
Y'all to sing with us on this next song.
from death. Come, oh, hear my cry. Come, oh, Spirit, come. One more time. Come, oh, light, illumine my darkness. Come, oh, light, revive me from death. Come, oh, hear my cry. Come, oh, Spirit, come.
Sing it one more time.
Come, oh light, illumine my darkness. Come, oh light, revive me from death. Come, oh hear my cry. Come, oh Spirit, come.
Oops. Did you do that on purpose? No. The assumption would be it was in your hand when I stood up. And I want to invite us to just take a moment. And I wonder, Austin, would you mind doing the singing bowl just to give us a chance to sort of have something to focus on? I'm going to invite you all to just listen to the sound, and however you get quiet, however you get in that place where we can be more present to the moment now than worrying about where we were before we got here or where we're going or where this is going, but just to be present with ourselves and in the presence of one another. And just allow the sound of the bell to draw your attention away from all the other distractions. Silence can be such a vulnerable place. A place where we bear all, where we wait, where we sit and think something must happen. Or where our mind gets tangled up in expectations or struggles or fears or the pains that we heard about during the week or the anxieties that are on our mind. And yet silence is such a sacred gift and an opportunity to let that go, to trust in the power of simply being present. Holy One, in this space, in this silence, teach us to let go enough to be present. In the words, in the sounds of the messages of pain that we hear around the world, when we feel them in our guts, when we toss them around in our brain with questions of why or solutions, remind us sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to be still and silent and just be present. Amen.